This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Hi there, Duke fans. Episode 551 of the DBR, the Duke Basketball Roundup, coming at you. Are you sick of us yet? I think we've been in your feed. I think this is either actually, this is 4 days in a row. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And by the way, we're going to have one tomorrow, Friday as well, because there's so much stuff to talk about. It is just Donald. But I'm Jason. That's Donald. Dude, I can't remember a week this busy that was not the regular season hasn't even started yet, and we're on to this incredibly busy period of time for Blue Devil news.
It's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's funny,
yes.
Part of it usually, Jason, is that like football at this point is kind of irrelevant, and it still very much is. So like we have the game tonight against Wake Forest. It's a really, really big game for us to get back on track. So it's great that we get to have that. And then the basketball news has been coming quick and fast. And I know we got some more that we have to talk about that, could be coming this weekend.
Exactly. And as we often do, we'll set the plate for all of you. We'll let you know what is on the menu. This episode today, we'll be talking about last night's game where the Blue Devils played a UNC-Pembroke, the last exhibition, last chance for us to see Duke before the games actually start to count in the scorebook. We're going to talk all about that extensively. Additionally, there is more recruiting news. Just when you thought Jon Scheyer couldn't get another one, it looks like maybe, possibly, Duke is about to get another one. And we will wrap it all up at the end. We could not let this episode go by without saying a few words about Robert Montgomery Knight, the general. We will have that coming up a little later. By the way, we already alluded to tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about the football game that's happening tonight, Duke versus Wake Forest. Tune in and watch that game. Blue Devils need your support as they attempt to become bowl eligible. They are big favorites against Wake Forest, but never an easy game against the Demon Deacons. And this Duke team's been very banged up lately. And then the other thing we're going to be doing tomorrow is we'll preview the start of the regular season, Duke's first regular season game against Dartmouth. We'll have all that you need to know about that. But first, let's go back in time to last night. The Blue Devils played UNC-Pembroke. It was a joke of a game, not the fault of UNC-Pembroke. It's just that Duke is just way, way better than a Division II team, even a really good Division II team. We've talked about these exhibitions that D1 teams, that Power 5 teams play against smaller teams, and sometimes having some trouble in some of those games. Quite often, the D2 and NIAI, whatever you call it, teams that they're playing are not that good. Pembroke has an excellent reputation at the D2 level. As the announcers mentioned on the broadcast a couple times, this is a team that's expected to be, like top 8, top 10 in Division II next year. So this was, again, not real competition for Duke, but a decent team, a team that plays with pride, a team that plays well. And the Blue Devils blew them out of the building, scoring 109 points. Donald, if I can, please allow me host privilege. Like, look, I've been sitting here, I've been doing nothing but talking. You said hi, and that's it.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Allow me host privilege. Here's how I want to kind of break down that exhibition last night. I want to talk first about the rotations, and let me begin with this. Obviously, everyone has been wondering who's the fifth starter. We've gotten some word, we've gotten some hints that it was going to be Jared McCain, not Ryan Young. Those seem to be the two guys that are kind of vying to be the fifth starter, along with the three returning sophomores and Jeremy Roach, our returning senior. Last night we saw it was Jared McCain. It's worth noting Caleb Foster and Ryan Young were the first guys off the bench. Though we need to talk about the fact Ryan Young did not play as much as you might have expected, given some of the preseason chatter about him, given some of what we've seen in scrimmages and other stuff. I don't know if maybe it was a function of Coach Scheyer wanting to see younger guys, not really needing to see Ryan Young against an overmatched opponent like this. But if you are one of those folks, and there are people out there who think that Ryan Young's going to play, 20 plus minutes per game, this exhibition game had to give you pause. He only played 9 minutes. He played the least of any scholarship player for Duke. And then the other rotation stuff I think we need to talk about is that Sean Stewart and TJ Power came in later than Caleb Foster and Ryan Young, but it still feels like those guys are very much in the rotation. Also feels like Jalen Blakes is in the rotation. Everyone kind of forgets about Jalen Blakes, but his defensive pressure is still, I think, going to be useful for Duke in most games. And then the last thing I want to mention about the rotation is that I suspect my man Jaden Schutt is the odd man out at the moment. I mean, sort of just like he was last year. He didn't come in until the 5-minute mark of the first 5 minutes left in the first half. Literally didn't play the first 15 minutes. He didn't play much in the second half until we were sort of down to the end of the bench guys, like the final, 7 or so minutes. And I'm starting to fear that he's going to have a lot of did not play coach's decision on his game log for this season. Donald, give me your thoughts on the rotation thus far.
So let's start with the starters. And I think you go back to the fifth starter and we'll talk about how Jared McCain did. I thought he did extremely well last night. But I think when it comes to between him and Ryan Young, we have heard that it's going to be a matchup thing. Whether if they want to go big, they want to go small, will depend on will actually factor into who starts, whether it's Jared McCain or Ryan Young. Last night, as you mentioned, Ryan Young only got 9 minutes, but Jason, he was one of the first people off the bench. So it tells you that he is going to factor into the rotation, whether, again, how they want to play. But if you noticed last night, most of the lineups that we had were quite small. And I think that's a product of playing UNC-Pembroke, who did not have any real big men to really worry about. So even Flip at times was on the floor by himself with, 3 guys that were under 6'6". And it's one of those things where I think the matchup predicated having a smaller lineup in there, which is why thankfully you got to see a lot of Jared McCain. You got to see a lot of Caleb Foster. You got to see Jalen Blakes play, and you got to see, even Jaden Schutt, as you mentioned, he was the last scholarship player to check into the game, but he still got 12 minutes out of the ordeal, mainly because we were operating small compared to some games where we will have to, muscle up, and we're going to see more of Ryan Young and TJ Power and Sean Stewart, like those type of guys. So I'm not necessarily concerned about how many minutes that Ryan played last night, because I think, again, if we line up against Arizona, you're going to see more Ryan Young because you're going to want to have more physicality. You're going to want to have more of a veteran presence. And he provided that in the 9 minutes that he was on the floor. He also I thought was great with the ball in his hands, working, trying to find angles to pass and get people layups, or, as we'll talk about later, get fouled and go to the free throw line, where we spent a lot of time last night.
Yeah. Now, the one guy we have not mentioned is Christian Reeves. And I know everyone was like, what's going on? Great, Christian. The word has come out that Christian Reeves tweaked his knee a little bit, did a little something to his knee in warmups, literally right before the game was going to start. And they said, okay, look, we're just going to, it's an exhibition. We're holding you out so that we can make sure that, everything's okay with the knee. From all we've heard, it is not an issue. It's a pity, because I was really interested in seeing where he fell in the rotation. But we'll get more to the big men in just a moment. Donald, I want to start on the guards if we could really quickly. And I know everyone is raving about Tyrese Proctor, 4 3-pointers in the first 3 minutes. How can you not rave about him? But ready for Jason's hot take. I sort of think Jared McCain was the most impressive player that I saw in this scrimmage. It felt to me like Jared McCain could get his shot anytime he wanted to. He didn't take a single shot that I thought was bad or rushed, or wasn't a shot that I was like, yeah, that was a good outcome in that play. And the thing that impressed me the most about Jared McCain is he has an unusual understanding, I think, of the geometry of basketball. He sees space where others don't see it. He creates angles that make life really difficult for his defender. That is why he lived at the free throw line. His opening bucket was one where he got in the lane and used his body to get space for his shot. He had a drive a short time later where he got bumped and he turned into a 3-point play because he recognized he was bumped and he was going to put a shot up and it went in. Look, we need to see him do it against top tier competition. I get that. But I haven't seen anything yet that I don't think is translatable almost regardless of the competition, because knowing those angles is it's not something you see from everybody. And hot take, you ready? You're going to say, what? I sort of see some of the craftiness and scoring cleverness from Jared McCain that you sometimes see from the great scoring guards like Steph Curry and Trae Young. I'm not saying he's a Steph or a Trae, two of the great scorers in the NBA. But these guys who sort of aren't like otherworldly run jump athlete, like a John Morant just jumps out of the, he's just on another level in terms of his athleticism. Those guys don't have that athleticism, but they have this craftiness around the basket. And I'll tell you one other thing. I sort of think there's a non-zero chance that Jared McCain leads this team in scoring this year. That's my big takeaway. I need to hear from you on some of those craziness. But like I said, I thought McCain was the most impressive player in this scrimmage.
We'll save that last part for the stats game, but I'm here to tell you that might be the hottest part of your take right there, that he's going to lead the team in scoring. I mean, yes, there's a non-zero chance, but I think everybody on this team has a non-zero chance of this working, except for guys who are not on this team. Jon Scheyer will not lead this team in scoring.
So just really quick, I non-zero chance. What I'm saying is that I actually think there's a case that can be made, and we're getting off track here. I think there's a case that 4 different guys could lead this team in scoring. Kyle Filipowski, who's the most obvious pick. Jeremy Roach is probably the second most likely pick. Tyrese Proctor, and I think Jared McCain falls in there as well. I think any one of those 4 guys could end up leading this team in scoring when the year's done. All right, back to you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the rest of your take is not actually that hot. I actually have in my notes, Jared McCain was the most impressive player to me last night. Here is why. For the first time, we harken back to, he was just on the Brotherhood podcast with Ryan Young, and Ryan Young in the clip asked him, hey, what was it like walking out for Countdown to Craziness? And Jared McCain was like, man, he kind of was like, is overwhelming at parts. And he kind of felt like not necessarily nervous, but he had those, those jitters of like, man, I'm really in Cameron. I'm really about to play basketball in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Well, last night he had probably the most pressure of anybody on the team because he was that 5th starter. And as we all know, if you're the starter on a team where there could be a lot of starters, if you get that position, then you either earn it and then you have to keep it. The most important job for him might be keeping his place in the starting line, or his most difficult task, because he has to perform. And I think last night he embraced that pressure that comes with being one of the starting 5 at Duke University, especially for this team who, as we talked about throughout the summer, has a lot of expectations. And I think when it comes to Jared McCain, I don't necessarily think it's a hot take to say that he crafts his game after some of those guys that you mentioned, the Steph Currys of the world, because those are the guys that are on TV. Jared McCain comes from that era of growing up, watching those guys play and learning from them. Just like, 10 years ago, people were saying, doing step back one-legged jumpers like Kobe. Just like in my time, people were trying to play like Jordan. Just like in your time, people were trying to play like, I don't know, Bob Lanier, somebody. Dude, shout out Bob Lanier.
Did you just do that? Come on, man.
Larry Bird, somebody, the 80s, right? You have the 80s, I had the 90s, and then he's modeling after the 2010s, not even the 2000s, the 2010s. And so when you think about it, yeah, he's going to take some of that game. I think one of the best plays of the game was that play you mentioned, right? Where he kind of flicked it off of himself, like knowing it was going to go in and knowing he was going to get the contact and the foul. He makes the and one, then goes down the next possession and steals the ball. Like that sort of
Yeah.
hustle, like, we're going to talk about that all season. Those sort of hustle players are what you need, but he's learning that from those, the great point guards of this era who have to be crafty. They're not the John Morants who are going to jump over you and drop you off at the 5th floor while they dunk you on the 9th. Like the guys who are going to have to figure out how to create their own shot. I think he's a great guy to find angles. He made great passes. I thought he made, for the most part, wonderful decisions with the basketball. And I think the best part about it is when we talk about the game on Monday, Jerry McCain is probably going to start that game because there is nothing to take away from this game that says Jerry McCain did not deserve that 5th spot, or that he did not earn the right to open the season as that 5th starter. So I think that's good. And of course, as we've talked about with freshmen, it's about consistency. Is he going to be able to be consistent throughout the year? As of right now, he hasn't shown that he is inconsistent. He has been very good at what he does. And the only thing that was probably quote was the air quote negative was that he didn't make any of his 3-pointers, but damn, did they look good when he shot them.
Like, we know he's going to make threes. We know
he's going to make them. So the confidence is there. And I think that's what's great about it.
All right, let me quickly go through the other guards, the other perimeter players that I want to talk about. Obviously, Tyrese Proctor, we're going to talk about the shooting, but I actually almost enjoyed more a couple of the really savvy passes that he made, and I love seeing him push the pace as much as he did. Duke had 27 fast break points in this game and had 20 assists with just 5 turnovers. You trace that stuff right back to the point guard, Tyrese Proctor. As great as the shooting, look, I don't expect him to hit 4 3-pointers in 3 minutes very often.
I do, Jason. I want him hitting 4 to 5 every single game. I'm just kidding.
There you go. Right. But obviously, I loved the rest of the game for him and the way he really controlled the pace. And I think that's so important for Duke. Jeremy Roach, look, steady. I mean, I don't know how you use any word but steady to describe Jeremy Roach. He gets to his spot. He knocks the shot down. He and McCain drew, I think this is an actual measurement, a metric shit ton of free throws. Is that's a correct measurement? I believe so, right?
Jason, they had, 43 free throws. They made 36 of them. That's 83.7%. I only ask them to do 70 to 75%. They went 83%. But again, they're finding ways to get points. And even in a game where they completely outmatched a UNC-Pembroke team who I thought played well, right? There was nothing about their game that they were like, oh, this is a completely overmatched. Like, this team does not deserve to be in this gym. They played hard, and they played hard for all 40 minutes. And I'll even talk about that in our quote bad section. But this team found ways to get to the free throw line, and they kept knocking them down. And that's a signal to the rest of college basketball saying, hey, we got guys that we're going to get to our spots. And if you try to foul us, we'll just beat you from the free throw line all night long. That's what you want to see. And that way, those lanes will be open next time, because teams are going to say, I don't want to foul them because that's giving them 2 free points. I'd rather take my chances by trying to defend them. And then you have them. You have that mismatch right there.
Yeah, the other comment I had on Jeremy Roach was I thought he was a pest on defense. He got his hands in there. He ended up with 3 steals. I wanted to quickly mention Caleb Foster. I was tremendously impressed with his defense as well. Lots of hustle. He moves his feet really well. He's excellent about being in the right place at the right time on defense. And, I mean, look, he finishes in the lane. That's Caleb Foster's bread and butter. His outside shot looks good. His bread and butter is, I'm going to use my body. I'm going to use my length, my physicality to get in the lane on you, and then I'm going to finish. And I just thought in general, those 4 guards for Duke, McCain, Proctor, Roach, and Foster, just really, really impressive. All right, should we get to the bigs now, or you got more on them?
No, let's go to the bigs, because I think that rotation was also pretty interesting.
Yes. All right. So I'll start with Kyle Filipowski. Jon Scheyer in the postgame said that Flip had a quiet 17 points, and I kind of agree with that. He was, for the most part, just getting the job done. I didn't see him handle the ball on the perimeter as much as I expected. Certainly not as much as last year. We saw very few of those, flip drives from the outside that were very effective for him a year ago. He ended up only taking 1 3-pointer. He made it, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I think Flip may not really be enjoying playing the 5 yet. I felt like he was forcing things a bit at times. Like I said, the ball wasn't in his hands maybe quite as much as it was a year ago. He lost his handle. He lost the ball in the post a couple times, especially in the first half. Now his teammates ended up recovering a couple of these loose balls. But it messes up the play. It messes up what was going on. And I also thought with him at the 5, Duke seemed, like you mentioned this, Donald, they seemed pretty small. Tyrese Proctor was guarding an opposing forward, the small forward for the most part. I'm a little bit concerned about our rebounding. We only out-rebounded Pembroke 36-31. We only grabbed about 1/3 of our offensive rebounds. Remember a year ago, this Duke team, offensive rebounding was like the best thing this Duke team did of anything last year.
And it was good last night. It was 40%. We offensive rebounded on 40% of possession. So I'm okay with that part.
Yeah, it was a small team though. And
right.
I just didn't see us, and a fair bit of that came sort of later in the game and the such. I didn't see us dominating them on the boards like you might have wanted against a D2 team. And Duke only had 2 block shots in the game, one of which was done by Neil Begovic. Shout out to Neil. But I'd like us to have more than 1 block shot by the guys who are actually going to playing a team, again, like UNC-Pembroke. And speaking of block shots, we had 6 of our shots packed. UNC-Pembroke had one guy who was erasing stuff at the rim left and right. He got to Mark Mitchell a couple times. So that's sort of, that's my initial take on Mark Mitchell, by the way, only had 2 rebounds. We need to get more from him. That's my, we're sort of mixing good and bad here, and I apologize for that. But that's my first take on Flip and Mitchell and the bigs. I'll have more on Sean Stewart, but I'll let you get in first.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Flip, I think the reason why it didn't feel like he was demonstrative is that, just as you mentioned, a lot of the times when he got his points last year, he'd get the ball on the wing and he would just absolutely just destroy his opponent on the way to the basket. When he had a full head of steam, nobody could stop him in this country. And I think that was one of the best parts of this game. When he's the 5, and especially, when we line up, when there's, again, three de facto point guards lining up at the 1, 2, and 3, you have Mark Mitchell at the 4, he has to be in the paint, or at least he has to figure out a way to keep his guy out of the lane. And even when they double teamed him, he didn't feel comfortable getting the ball because, again, there wasn't another big man for him to kind of pass to or a guy that would stretch the lane. So I think there was a couple of times where both Flip and Ryan Young were in the game, and that was where we had a couple of times where Ryan would initiate a high-low situation to get Flip in the position that he
had a beautiful pass on one of those.
Yeah, and of course Ryan Young's a great passer, but the great thing is he also can lead Flip into the position that Flip wants to be in, because every time Flip caught the ball from Ryan Young, we turn around and it turned into points, whether he got fouled or it was a lay-in. So I think that's some of the things they're going to have to work out, and it's not necessarily where Flip has to be, quote, happy playing the 5, but there's going to be times where he's going to be the biggest guy on the floor, and he already is going to command attention because he's a first-team All-American. He's preseason ACC Player of the Year, yada, yada, yada. He's going to command attention. I think he will embrace that part of his game and figure out ways, because, again, like you said, he took a 3-pointer and he made it. That's crucial, because last year he would take some of those threes and he wouldn't make them. He was making I think it was under 30% last year from 3. So when you think about him being a little bit more consistent from 3, that's only just going to draw people out further. And again, when he gets the ball on the perimeter, people got to at least respect his shot. And as great as he was last year at driving the lane when people didn't respect his shot, imagine what happens if they do.
Yeah, so let me have a couple other things to say about the big men. You could not watch the second half of this game and not be super impressed with Sean Stewart. He has incredible.
He was a beast.
Yeah,
I loved it.
He has incredible body control in the air around the basket. Like, he goes up and he's able to get his shoulders square and get in position to finish off his basket. I read some stuff where people were like comparing it to Zion. I don't want to go quite that far, but not entirely dissimilar from what we saw from the great Zion Williamson. He also, we mentioned we had scrimmage footage where we saw Sean Stewart take like a little mid-range jumper. I was like, I didn't know that was in his bag. I didn't really expect it. He pulled out 2 of them in this game and knocked down both of them. Like 8 to 10 footer. He nailed it both times and confidently taking it, not like, oh, you're going to leave me here. Oh, well, like, this was in the flow. So I was really, really impressed with him. It is hard to believe that a guy that looked that good is going to be like our 8th or 9th guy in the rotation, especially if, as I mentioned, if playing the 5 doesn't really work that great for Flip all the time. Man, I just feel like, Stewart was, further down in the rotation last night, but I feel like there's a lot of a chance that he's going to move up in the rotation. And then the last, I know you want to talk about Sean Stewart, but the last big guy I did want to talk about was TJ Power. I noticed, by the way, he didn't get in until late in the first half. In the second half, he got in a little bit earlier, which I think was, good for his sort of rotation notation, so to speak. Didn't do a ton in this game. His 3-point shot looks very good, even though he only hit 1 of 4. I think that TJ struggles on defense a little bit. He did pick up 4 fouls in his 16 minutes of playing. And I didn't notice him having a huge impact anywhere on the game. He's still figuring out, I think, what works at this level. He absolutely looks like he's going to be a very good player someday. And I think he is in the rotation, but I think he's like 9th or so. And they're going to be big games. Look, we got Arizona, Michigan State coming up pretty soon. I'm not so sure that he plays a lot against those teams. All right, what you got in the freshman bigs?
I think, first off, Sean Stewart, I thought looked great last night. And I think, like you said, he did stuff that we haven't seen yet, like in the blue-white scrimmage and some of these videos of scrimmages that we've seen in practices and stuff. He has developed a little bit better control, both on offense and defense. We talked about how his defensive portion was probably much further ahead than his offensive ability. But as you said, he felt very comfortable on the floor on offense. I mean, he came right off the bench, checked into the game, and immediately caught an alley-oop from Caleb Foster. That's how you introduce yourself. Like, that's a great way. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So you saw that athleticism. You saw the control of that athleticism. You saw him, again, unleash it at times. And I think he's only going – the fact when someone is raw, has a raw talent, it means they're coachable as well. As long as they're coachable, they can improve tremendously in certain areas. And I think on defense, I thought he was able to stay within himself. He kind of had, I know it seems like he's been learning a lot from Mark Mitchell on how to play defense without fouling. And I thought he did fairly well at that. I think at the end of the day on offense, some of these things in his game that he's developing are going to be there. And I think, pulling out that mid-range jumper is going to be something that he's going to have in his bag because he feels confident that he can pull it out. And also, it's something that the other team's not going to expect from him, because whenever he comes on the floor, they were keying in on the guards. And if you notice, when TJ Power's in the game, when Sean Stewart's in the game, the UNC-Pembroke was focusing on the guards because they realized, the guards and maybe if Flip was in the contest, he realized that they were going to be the ones that were going to be carrying the bulk of the scoring. So for Sean Stewart to figure out a way to get into open space, find the ball and finish and, absorb contact is going to be something that we're going to hopefully see him improve on as the year goes along. And that's going to be a really, really crucial thing for us, because if he can do that, then that second unit becomes even more solid, which makes the opponents tired at the end of the games when our first team can shine.
All right, Donald, we're about pretty much done with the Pembroke scrimmage. I know we do want to we can do a player of the game really quickly. I said it was Jared McCain. I think you said the same thing, right? Yeah. All right. So usually we start our coverage, so everybody understands, with headlines. And we typically get headlines from all of you out there, all the listeners. You send us headlines to dbrpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet them at us. And every game we've been getting dozens and dozens of them, and then we pick the best ones. We read them on the air. We give you full credit for the creativity that you guys come up with. Well, so Donald, for this game, I know we didn't sort of tell people that we were doing it for this game, and frankly, I didn't write a headline. I wasn't really prepared for the operation, but you got one for us, right?
Yeah. So Aaron Cohen on Twitter, and again, our Twitter is @Duke Roundup. So if you want to go there, tweet us your headline after the game, or even tweet some of your thoughts. We will read some of the best ones when we recap games throughout the season. But Aaron Cohen had one, and Jason, this was great because Aaron Cohen is clearly a listener, and I'm gonna share with you in just a second. Balanced Blue Devils beat down Braves. This man understands that we love alliteration, and alliteration will go a long way into getting your headline read on this show. So Aaron, thank you for that. I thought that was pretty cool. And Jason, I actually did have a headline that I was thinking of as the game progressed, and it's a very simple one. We ready. The team last night,
I like that.
We had the whole thing yesterday where we talked about how Louisville was not ready for prime time, and we've even heard some stuff this morning about some turmoil at Louisville. We're not going to get into it because it's all spec. But the fact of the matter is this: if you had any reservations about Duke Blue Devils being ready for the start of the season, you can dispel those notions. Duke basketball is ready to begin this season, and we saw that last night.
I love it. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, folks. On the other side, we said it earlier, another one. Just days after Duke lands Cooper Flagg, another big man appears, maybe, appears to be headed to Durham. That story in just a moment.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We are back from the break, and Donald, it's recruiting news time. So, big man Patrick Ngongba came to Countdown to Craziness. He and Cooper Flagg, VJ Edgecombe, they were all there at Countdown to Craziness, along with Isaiah Evans and Darren Harris. You know, we had all the recruits in the house, and these guys were uncommitted. They weren't sure, not certain where they were going to go. Cooper Flagg left Countdown to Craziness. He said, going to Duke. Well, now it looks like Patrick Ngongba left Countdown to Craziness and said, I'm going to Duke. Because last weekend, Patrick went and visited his other finalists. He has 3 finalists, technically: Duke, Kansas State, and Kentucky. Everyone says this is between Duke and Kansas State. His family has ties to Kansas State and to K-State head coach Jerome Tang. He has a lot of ties to Jerome Tang. And Kansas State really thought they have an excellent chance at landing him. Patrick would be one of the biggest recruits in Kansas State history. This is not a school that gets a lot of big time basketball players, and he'd be a very big deal for them. He's a top 20, top 25-ish kind of recruit. And just today, in just the past couple hours, there started to be a flurry of crystal ball projections and, these recruiting gurus who have sources here and there who are saying Patrick Ngongba is going to go to Duke. He is scheduled to make his announcement on the 4th, on Saturday. I'm going to talk a little bit about him now because our weekend's very busy. We're doing a lot of podcasts, and I'm not sure we're going to have time necessarily to give a deep dive on him after he announces, but all these forecasters are all saying Patrick Ngongba is going to end up coming to Duke. And in fact, there's a guy who earlier, he's a Kansas State recruiting guru, expert on the K-State team, and he had picked Patrick Ngongba to go to Kansas State. And he just flipped his prediction. When your own guys are saying, oh, you know how I thought we were going to get him? Now I think the other guys are going to get him. It's a pretty good sign that this kid's about to head to Durham. Let me tell you about him very quickly. He's 6'11", 235 pounds. He is a big boy. Plays for PVI, Paul VI. Duke knows PVI very, very well. Shout out Jeremy Roach. Shout out Trevor Keel. Shout out Devin Hare. I mean, it goes on and on. PVI, top tier PVI players, they like to come down to Durham. Patrick Ngongba has a really solid frame. This is a guy who will not get pushed around. He has very broad shoulders. He is very efficient and very good with shots around the basket. He has lots of length in his arms. He has good footwork, and it allows him to convert shots in the post at a really, really nice percentage. He hit close to 70% of his shots on the elite EYBL circuit. That's a great number, but people who watch him say he is really developing a face-up game as well. They say it will not be surprising if he ends up being a guy who is taking and making 3-pointers at some point in his career, which is exciting to hear about. He's a winner. His team won the Peach Jam, the EYBL, and they, I mentioned Darren Harris was his AAU teammate is also his teammate at PVI. These are guys who like to play together, and now they're both going to be playing together, apparently, in Durham. Now, the knock on Patrick, he's not a versatile defender. This is a guy that if he gets switched onto a guard, he's going to have trouble. He doesn't have great lateral quickness on defense. He blocks shots, but he's not going to be Derek Lively. He's not going to be Mark Williams. He's not going to be Cooper Flagg. He'll give you some rim protection, but not on the level of those kind of players. And again, another knock on him is he needs to work on his motor. He's a rebounder, okay, but not one of these guys who just like thirsts and hungers for the ball at every moment. I think if he comes to Duke, playing in practice, both with and against Cooper Flagg, will teach him a little something about motor and how important it is. Cooper Flagg's motor runs at 130% every single second that he's on the floor. So I think that'll be good for Patrick Ngongba to see. And the last thing I wanted to mention about him, kid comes from a basketball playing family. Mom and dad both played college basketball at GW, right there in your neighborhood, Donald.
It's just down the street. It's a few blocks away.
Baby. Yeah. His father was like a part-time starter throughout his career for GW. Didn't score a lot. He was a good rebounder and such. About a 6'8", forward kind of player. His mom, though, was elite. When she left GW in 1997, she was the program's all-time leading scorer, all-time leading shot blocker, and second leading rebounder. His mom can play some basketball. Like we talked about, Cooper Flagg's mom played for Maine. Now we got Patrick Ngongba, but his mom was like, really big time when she was at GW. And now it looks like Patrick has decided to attend Duke University. Donald, do you have anything on by the way, I should mention Duke needs a big man next year. I was going to
lead with that.
Take that part.
Yeah, I was going to lead with that. And that if you think about the scholarship players that are, highly in the rotation, the only one that's bigger than him is Flip. And, we expect Flip is going to, especially when we win the national championship this year, spoiler alert, that he's going to go.
You're forgetting Christian Reeves.
Well, Christian Reeves, right?
Oh, you said in the rotation.
In the rotation, yeah, in the rotation. But again, like you have those. That's going to be his competition for playing time next year, right? At the 5, and he's a true 5, like you said. He's a guy who is going to not necessarily camp down in the post, but he's going to be a guy that can play with his back to the basket, can play, start to do his face-up game. He can take you out on the perimeter, but he's going to be a guy that can occupy that 5 position, and it makes it where other guys don't have to play out of position on defense. He may not be, the elite rim protector that we're going to need, but like you said, we have other guys in the class and that are going to be on this team next year that are going to be able to do that. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm not going to jinx it, so I'm going to say I hope that he decides to go to Duke. I know this, these things can change at the last minute. So
yeah, as
right now it may look good, but I really hope that that Patrick Ngongba joins his teammate Darren Harris in Durham next year. And I think again, I might need to get some PVI games. I knew I need to do that for Darren Harris, but man, everybody's coming from there. I just might need to say like, hey guys, follow your teammate this way, just like the lines that we have with the little kids at the museums. Just have them all going one way.
I like it. Yeah, you should get over there, watch a game, then come talk about it on the show. That'd be a lot of fun. And the last thing I want to say about Patrick Ngongba is I love that this guy apparently looks like is coming to Duke when he's going to have to fight for playing time. It's the same kind of thing. TJ Power, Sean Stewart. These are guys who are coming to Durham, even though, based on their recruiting ranking, so to speak. Darren Harris is another one like this. You do not project them as immediate starters. These are guys who are going to probably have to take a little bit of time to develop, whether that a little bit of time is part of their freshman year or waiting until their sophomore year, or even perhaps beyond, perhaps like a guy like Christian Reeves and Jaden Shute. I love that Jon Scheyer continues to reel in guys like this who just want to play hard, get better, and earn their time over the course of time. I don't think there's a scenario. Look, we could be wrong. I don't think it's very likely that if Patrick Ngongba picks Duke, that he will be penciled in as a starter next year. But he's a guy who can absolutely be a depth piece, and he's a guy who you would think would have a very bright future down the road.
And I was going to mention, when you go to a place like Paul VI, one of the best programs in the country, you aren't just some guy that's like, I mean, again, short of a couple of guys in, basketball, you're not a guy that's going there just like, yeah, put me at the 5. I do my 30 minutes and I go home. He's a guy that goes there to compete. You go there to compete against the best. You go there to play with the best, and you go there to play against the best. And you are in competitive mode the entire time. So he is a guy that everyone needs to understand. He's got some fight in him. And I think, like you said, I think as from a 5 perspective, if we're not doing this positionless basketball, then yeah, he's going to get some playing time wherever you put him in, whether it's at the 5 or the 4. But I think the best part is that he is going to come here. If he does choose to go to Duke, he's going to go to Durham, and he's going to be ready to compete for every single minute that he gets. And that's what I think. I know the UOI, Sam has talked about this on the show. I think we enjoy that about the guys that Jon Scheyer's bringing in, that all of them come in ready to compete, and they understand that nothing is given, everything is earned, and that makes for better basketball.
I love it. All right, we're going to wrap up on kind of a sad note. As we mentioned at the top, Bobby Knight has passed. There are few names in college basketball coaching who are as polarizing, who inspire as many opinions, but also who inspire as much respect as Bobby Knight did. And Donald, I'll let you go first on this. Absolute legend. At one time, the leading, the most winningest coach in all of college basketball until his buddy Mike Krzyzewski came along. Bobby Knight has passed.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at his resume, it's one of the elite resumes in coaching history, regardless of sport. He's one of the few coaches that have won a national title as a player and a coach. He won at Ohio State in 1960 as a player. He obviously won 3 national championships at Indiana. Has one, the last team to go undefeated in college basketball was his 1976 national championship team. He took over Army at the age of 24. That's obviously something that does not happen in college basketball very, very frequently. And, like you said, he coached one Mike Krzyzewski in his early days, and was a guy who shaped so many great players. I'll tell you, Jason, I grew up a Michigan fan. I hated Indiana, but I hated Indiana as a program. I just hated it, but you had to respect those teams that put out, because every time a Bobby Knight Indiana team hit the floor, they were a national title contender. It was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You had to bring your A game here or against them. 5 Final Fours, 11 Big Ten titles. He even won an NIT title. He won Coach of the Year.
Yeah, by the way, he won an NIT title back when winning the NIT was a big deal.
Meant something. Yeah. It's incredible, the legacy that he has created on the basketball court. Also, Jason, we talk about his international. He won the Pan Am Games as a coach, gold medal 84 Olympics, again, held in LA, where you have that pressure of winning in USA basketball after everything that had happened in 72. In 1980, we didn't even participate. So,
right.
He's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. And yeah, Jason, it's polarizing for him as well, because of all the the tactics that he used, the anger and the fire and however you want to describe his emotions when he was coaching. Almost everything that he did as a college basketball coach could not be done today. But the times, he was that guy that everyone said, hey, he getting you. He would dig under your skin. He would yell at you. But he would make you a better man. He'd make you a better basketball player. And I know at the end, when Coach K was approaching his record, they were very close. And I know that became a little acrimonious and adversarial, especially as Coach. Yeah. A strained relationship, especially as Coach K passed his record. He won 903 at the Garden, and Bobby Knight was calling the game, and they had that, kind of awkward handshake. But yeah, I really hope, and I know Coach K has always said that no matter what, he's always said that, General Robert Montgomery Knight was the guy that shaped him into the basketball player and the coach that he became. And I really hope, I know that he's feeling it no matter what the relationship was. I do hope that they were able to patch things up, because I know that Bobby Knight had been sick lately, and I think he had just gone back to Indiana a couple of years ago for the first time since he was fired unceremoniously in 2000. So I really hope that all of that was patched up. And again, yeah, like you said, it's kind of a is kind of a twisted legacy for him and very, very polarizing. But at the end, when you hang your hat on the hook of respect, you have to give respect to Bobby Knight for all that he brought to college basketball. And again, he shaped so many guys into the players and coaches that they were.
Yeah, I'll show my age a little bit. I vividly remember watching Keith Smart hit that game-winning shot in the 87. Yeah, the 87. National championship game to give Bobby Knight his second, was it second, third national,
that was his
third national title. Sorry. The first two he won, I was too young to really watch, but I watched Keith Smart. I watched that team win that national title. And then I watched him over the years always be very, very successful. And at Duke, we owe him a special debt of gratitude because, as you mentioned, he was absolutely Mike Krzyzewski's mentor and taught Krzyzewski a lot of what Coach K knew about the game. I think one of the better ways that I've seen to remember Bobby Knight is the column that Jay Billis wrote on ESPN. I've read a lot of Bobby Knight takes and Bobby Knight stories over the past 12 or so hours since we heard that Bobby Knight had passed. And I just thought Jay's column was so beautiful. And I just want to read a couple excerpts from it for folks who haven't listened to it. And frankly, even if you did read it already, I bet some of these will bring a smile to your face. Jay starts out by saying that Bobby Knight was the most successful, respected, influential, and powerful coach of his era and beyond. And he was also the most controversial, criticized, and feared coach of his time. Jay says he could have coached any sport and been just as effective as the way he coached basketball. He had an analytical mind. He understood motivation and inspiration. He had an extraordinary ability to break things down. Jay says that watching a baseball game with Bobby Knight was a special treat because he could pick it apart the same way you would expect him to dissect a basketball game. That is truly remarkable. He said that Knight had an ability to see minute yet important details on a basketball floor that Jay said was unmatched. Jay said it would be hard to believe that any coach anywhere could not learn something from sitting in a film session with Bobby Knight and then feeling somewhat uneducated as Bobby Knight pointed out details that even the best coaches would probably have missed. And then I love this story. Jay said that in 1984, after coaching Michael Jordan in the gold medal U.S. Olympic team, Donald, you mentioned that, the general manager of the Portland Trailblazers, Stu Inman, who had the second pick in the NBA draft. Everyone knew Hakeem Olajuwon was going number one. And Portland was trying to decide, should we take Michael Jordan number two? And Stu Inman called up Bobby Knight and, wanted to know his advice on Michael Jordan. And Knight said, Jordan's the best basketball player he'd ever seen. And Inman said, well, but we've already got Clyde Drexler. We really need a center. And Bobby Knight's response was, then play Michael Jordan at center.
and they did that. They didn't they get Sam Bowie? Is that who they got?
Yes, they drafted Sam Bowie. Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah. Didn't quite work out for them. They should have listened to Bobby Knight. Jay talked about how Bobby Knight, some little details, like how Bobby Knight would keep his practice plans secret. He'd write them on index cards that he wouldn't even show to his assistant coaches so the players wouldn't know what to expect or how to pace themselves in practice. Jay talked about the fact that Bobby Knight had the strangest taste in beverages, that he liked to order Dr. Pepper with lemonade. God, that sounds disgusting. That's not a combination.
Do we call that a Bob Knight? Like you have the Arnold Palmer. Is that the Bob Knight? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to try that.
Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to try that one. Yeah, exactly. And then, so anyway, that Jay Billis column, folks, just go out there to ESPN.com and find it. It's worth reading. I gave you some of the highlights from it. My bottom line at the very end, as much as we enjoyed watching Bobby Knight coach, because he was a hell of a coach, I enjoyed Bobby Knight, the analyst. There was a period on ESPN from 2008 to 2015, and a lot of it was studio work, but Bobby Knight was also doing broadcasts. He was doing games. Folks, if you didn't catch Bobby Knight calling a basketball game, you missed something. He was great. And to hear him just point out things, again, Jay talked about it in that column. The stuff he would point out, well, I was like, I'm getting a lesson in basketball every single time I listened to Bobby Knight doing color commentary on a basketball game. And to this day, I'll go ahead and say it. There's no color commentator, analyst, whatever you want to call it, who is even in the same league as what Bobby Knight was. Don't you agree, Donald?
I thought he was very good. And I think the best part about him was that he didn't, if he saw something on the court, right? Like you see some analysts will see something on the court and they're very quick to immediately talk about it or interrupt and say, yeah, this is what happened. He'd be very calm. I think it's funny. Ironically, he was known as a guy who was fiery and, flew by, kind of very emotional. And during those games, he was very calm and reserved. And whenever there was a point to be made, he made it clear and succinctly, and it fell into the flow of the game. And like you said, Jason, you did learn something about how you watch a basketball game. If you remember, Jason, that you mentioned that tail end of when he was on was kind of when we were starting this show.
Yeah.
And you were able to we had to learn as the the two of us, and also Sam, we had to learn how to not watch the game as a fan all the time, right? We had to kind of dig into the analytics a little bit, kind of dig into again, spacing and some of those things that you kind of have to think like a coach. And having him on broadcast was great because you got to get into the mind of a coach, understand what situations would require certain things and why at the end of games, some teams feel like they, the cream rises to the top and why some they fall flat. Those were little things that you got whenever Bob Knight was on TV. And I think, like you said, yeah, it was always an excellent interpretation, analysis, and perspective, because you didn't just get any coach. You got one of the greatest coaches on that call.
Yeah. So with that, we will wrap it up here on episode 551 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We mentioned it earlier, but I will mention it again. Feel free to reach out to us. Send us that email, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Donald and I will be reading. We will be answering. And we especially want you to know that on Monday, when the Blue Devils play Dartmouth, when that game ends, we better be getting headlines from all of you. We want those pithy, funny, amusing headlines. If you want to drop in a couple, words of analysis or thoughts or something like that, we won't steal it. We'll give you credit. We're very good about that kind of thing, right, Donald?
We don't plagiarize.
No, definitely not. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We'll be back in your feed again tomorrow. Are you getting sick of us yet? You're probably getting sick of us. I hope not. Back in your feed again tomorrow to talk a little bit about some football being played tonight and some basketball, previewing the start of the Blue Devils season. Until then, I'm Jason. He's Donald. This is the Duke Band to play us out and take us home. By the way, have you listened to yesterday's yet?
I have not yet. No.
See if you notice there were two different times where, and it's probably my internet, probably not yours, where you froze for me. And then when you come back, you freeze for 2 seconds. When you come back, you're sped up for 5 seconds.
Yeah, that happened on my end too, where you were saying something and I was like, I hope he comes back. It was maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And then the audio came through fine, but your video you're doing this.
Right, exactly. But the audio is sped up as it catches back up to where you are.
Yeah.
And I was able to edit them out and they all sound fine. But I was I wonder if someone's listening at 1.5, which I typically listen to, they're going to be oh my God, that's so fast. I can't get it.
Right. I listen to 1.5 just to make sure we don't sound like the Micro Machines guy.
Yeah, no, I know. And we do sometimes.
Yeah. Usually when we're excited.